And now, like a hostess at the European Song Contest, I'll say, now we go to Paris, not for the French vote, but for the French political voice in Europe. And I was very nervous about the sort of whether our overall technical sort of situation would be the perfect one, but I can see that the Minister of France is with us from Paris, so everything is working, so I don't have to tap dance or sing a song. So a warm welcome to you, Clément Beaune, Minister of State of European Affairs. I wish the Danish audience could see your office, because if I'm not completely wrong, you actually have a Lego version of the Élysée in your office, a gift from the Danish government during your president's official visit to Denmark. It's a wonderful symbol of the French-Danish friendship, but as I understand it, it's actually also a statement from your side that it's not enough with the Franco-German relationship. We also need to look upon countries such as Denmark, and I think that your participation here is a living proof of that point. But what is your present vision of Europe, and where do you see that Europe has to change in a world of COVID-19, Brexit and Biden? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be with you even via screen and the video conference we all use these days. And I'm very honored to speak after Prime Minister Frederiksen and to be able to take part in this event. Actually, when I was invited a few weeks ago, I still hoped I could travel to Copenhagen for this opportunity and this occasion, but I hope I will be able to come soon and to have a physical meetings as we sometimes recall them, and it's a nice memory we want to go back to as soon as we can. And thank you again for this opportunity to try to detail a French vision of the current state of the EU, the impact of the crisis, and what we can imagine for the post-crisis moment. Maybe a few remarks before I simply go to questions and answers. When we try to look, it's unfortunately not over, but when we try to look at what has developed and what has happened during this corona crisis nearly since a year now. And when we look at what the EU was able to do or not able to do, I think we can draw some lessons for our EU and for the future. When we look at the economic side of the crisis, because it's obviously not only a health crisis, I think we see strong European action. Of course, we have had disagreements, we still have, between France and Denmark. Sometimes it was not easy, as we know, when we discussed about the budget or the recovery plan, but we made an agreement and we struck a deal at 27, even on these complicated elements. And I think since the very beginning of the crisis, a year ago, around March 2020, we acted and we went beyond the prophecy that was sometimes applied to the EU, which was to act always too little, too late. I think we did not do this mistake this time. I don't want to be too long or too detailed, but when you look at what for the Eurozone at least, what the European Central Bank has been doing, and all central banks have been deciding since March 2020, it's very powerful. When you look at the rules we decided to put aside for a moment, competition rules, budget rules, fiscal rules for the countries which are concerned. It was also a powerful and pragmatic response from the European Commission at that time. And even on the topic I was mentioning, budget, solidarity, common debt, it was difficult, it was tense sometimes, and we had clashes, if I may say, democratic and political manner. But last summer, so quite quickly, because it was right after the first wave of the crisis, we made this deal that I was referring to with a historical agreement on common debt, on a recovery plan. It's probably a bit slow now to be delivered and to start, but it's really on the right track, which I would see as a lesson when you have a toolbox for the EU and competencies for the EU or for Eurozone institutions in some cases, able to act. It does act, they do act, and they provide an answer that we need as a at the European level, at the European dimension, as part of the crisis response. And I think it's very important when we compare this to what has happened in other areas, especially in the health area, or in a close issue, which is the border issue and how we move freely or not within Europe. I just take these two examples because I think it's very interesting to see that the same week last year, March 2020, when we decided, or European institutions decided to lift some rules, to provide some monies for central banks, to provide some monies through the EU budgets and to work on recovery, we had very, very strong tensions between member states regarding borders, sometimes border closures, usually in a non-coordinated manner. And we had also, we do remember this, it was probably the most painful moment and image of Europe, tensions between member states regarding health itself, masks, deliveries of medical equipments. We were lacking them all over the place, and we were sometimes tempted, all of us, including France, I must say, to close our borders or to close our markets to the expense, to the detriment of our neighbors. And we saw that all over the place across the EU with more or less intensity. And I don't think it's only because member states became under such pressure that they had to do this. It's certainly part of the elements, but it's also that there was no framework to organize this at the European level. And when we started to develop this coordination through recommendations regarding border closures, border openings, border controls, and so on, we improved the situation, not perfect still, but we improved the situation, and we are not now in the situation that we experienced last year. And when you also look at what was developed by the EU in the health dimension itself, I think we also made important progress. I know it's the case in France, it's, I think, the case in Denmark and in many member states. There is criticism now about the vaccination process, the vaccination frameworks that we chose to put for the purchase of vaccines at the European level. But I think we did right in this respect, because if we can compare with other countries and so on, and we have certainly a lot of things to improve. But at the same time, if we compare this common framework purchasing vaccines with a national, strictly national approach, I think we would be nearly literally at war between member states to get doses that the neighbor would try to get. We saw that to some extent with masks, as I was mentioning. I don't want that in Europe now. We see that with vaccines, with a high level of intensity in the tensions we have to face. So let's improve it. Let's work on it. Let's make it faster. But this European framework, I think, is really a protection. And what we saw is that in a few weeks last summer, we managed to set up a European framework regarding vaccine, and I think it was a right decision. What's lessons from these examples, I'm trying to draw for the post-COVID moment that we all hope will come as soon as we can? That first we will have to think about our priorities and the competencies at the EU level in a pragmatic manner. But as I said in your press this morning, I think if a year and a half ago any president or prime minister in a European summit, as the one we will have this afternoon, had said to his or her colleagues, guys, I have a brilliant idea, let's do health, let's have a health strategy or roadmap, everyone would have said, he or she is crazy, we have other stuff to do. And the EU has nothing to do with that. Now we see that there is an added value to work on some elements of the health policy at the EU level. And we'll probably have another set of areas in which we can do this. I know how sensitive it is in Denmark, in France too, to be frank. It doesn't but mean that you have to take one public policy and to move it to the EU level. I don't believe in this kind of black or white approach. It's very clear that in many areas of the health policy, to take this, to keep this example, we need to have a local, regional, or national approach to manage our hospitals, to organize in terms of logistics, our vaccination campaigns, to make decisions on lockdowns, health measures, whatever they are, because they need to be adapted to local national situations. I don't expect the European Commission to decide on whether cinemas are open in Copenhagen or theaters in Paris. I don't think it would make any sense, even if we can compare or coordinate probably in a soft manner. But on other elements of the same health area, we have to act at the European level, and I think vaccine purchase is a good example, or in the months to come, to develop a European network, agency, whatever we create, to fund better our pharmaceutical research that we saw during the crisis everywhere in Europe, with differences, but everywhere in Europe was lagging behind some of our competitors, including starting with the USA. So I think there will be this necessary thinking about the competencies, projects, our roadmap. Second, I think, just to give a few feelings at this moment, we will have a moment when we need to focus on elements of solidarity. We manage with the recovery plan. I think it's too slow, I said it, but it's there. If we had not agreed on such a recovery plan, I think now the level of tensions, the divergences, the oppositions or conflicts within the EU would have been much bigger. We would have experienced a new debt crisis, financial crisis, as we went through more than 10 years ago, with a higher level of intensity, and we will need to focus on other solidarity projects, not only budgetary or fiscal projects, after the crisis. Do we have common industrial projects? Do we have common health production projects, medicine production projects, and so on and so forth? I think we will have also to embody this European solidarity after the crisis. It will be seen as very necessary after a moment of difficulties and sometimes tensions. And I think, in particular, I will finish with that just to open the discussion. There will be a necessary focus on youth, on the younger generation, because we see everywhere, I think there are probably nuances, but everywhere are now getting older. But when I look at people who are half my age, I must say around 20 now, studying or whatever they are doing, it's very difficult. And they will have, inevitably, the feeling that they made, true or false, whatever, the perception will be there, that they made the higher level of efforts. They could not start their job or go to university or do apprenticeship or whatever. They were deprived of social life, which is probably at this moment, at this age, even more difficult than for others. And they will have the feeling, I don't want us to enter in a generation conflict, but we should be aware and vigilant of this. They will have the impression that they made efforts through debt, public spending during the crisis, which I think was absolutely necessary, but will leave to everyone a higher level of public debt. They will have to pay for this, a way or another. So we should have also at the EU level, I think, some initiatives to prove that we are doing something for younger people, whether it's funding better our universities, funding better mobility across Europe, funding better entrepreneurship loans or whatever it is. I think we can be creative in this respect, but if there is no European initiative in this respect, I think we will miss our targets of creating a European solidarity project towards the future. And just let me finish, sorry to be a bit long, on one note, which you might think is very different from what we are all experiencing with COVID, and it is. I think last week we were all impressed by what happened with this little robot, Perseverance, on Mars, and it was like a dream, a positive moment that was suspending our difficulties during the crisis. We also the images, fake or real videos and so on. It says something also. We don't want to be stuck in crisis management. We don't want our, I think, governments and probably the EU even more to be stuck in day-to-day business. We will need dreams, we will need long-term thinking, we will need hope, we will need positive projects after the crisis. That's why I was also mentioning this young or youth dimension in the priorities we will have to set for the EU in the aftermath of the COVID crisis. Sorry for being a bit long and to touch upon different topics. I wanted just to share these remarks with you before we can exchange, and I'm again very happy to be with you today.
Thank you very much, and also for mentioning the youth sort of factor, although you made me feel very old, but I have to cope with that. You also highlighted the importance of the recovery fund. That was the major issue last year. You sort of seem to think that it's going rather slowly. But what is France actually doing to make sure that this very, very important recovery fund actually turns into a success, improves sort of the overall situation of our sort of economy and sort of also making sure that we have jobs? What is actually your strategy with regards to that?
Well, good question. I think the first thing is that we have to make it happen, as I was mentioning. We were happy to have a unanimous political agreement. It was difficult, but it was quite quickly achieved last summer. Then we had some procedures which are normal in our democratic systems with European Parliament, now with national parliaments to vote and to ratify. I think we should, and I hope this message will be shared this afternoon at the European Council, we should all try to accelerate, to speed up. It's true for member states, it's true for the European Commission, so that all national plans are produced, approved as quickly as possible, and the money is coming. So that's the first condition to be very concrete and pragmatic of any possible success. Then it's not because the money is flowing that success is coming. So I think we have a responsibility in all member states to do something, sorry to put it very simply, to do something useful with this money. And here I'm aware that the countries like France and others, around 10 basically, who were the most active from the very beginning, from March last year actually, to propose such a recovery plan, to propose such a new instrument as common debt, and we know how difficult again it was. We have to make it a success in our country, in our countries, and for Europe with clear priorities. I mean, if we misuse the money, all of us, but in particular the countries who were advocating strongly for this plan, then of course we will reopen the debates. Was it relevant to do it? Was it too much? Was it too quick? Was it a good tool to resort to common debt in the EU and so on and so forth? All this balance, this equilibrium will be questioned again. So I think we have a particular responsibility in making sure it goes to the right priorities. In France, because we also felt this responsibility, we produced our recovery plan quite early, already last September. Already 10% of our recovery plan is actually disbursed, so we are trying to ourselves to go quickly. It's our national interest, I think, but it's also this political EU interest. And we have to set the right priorities. I was mentioning the necessity to make sure this money is useful. If we use it for digital and for green transitions as priorities, I think here we have the right objectives. And that's why it was also important that the Commission and Member States agreed a few weeks and months ago on the fact that more than a third of the plan, each plan, would go to green transition, and at least 20% of each plan will go to digital transition. Now we have to get a common discussion and a common check to make sure that these priorities are respected for real, and that the money is used in this investment approach, not to increase public spending in the longer run, but to recreate convergence within Europe and to speed up the recovery at the EU level. If we invest so much money like this, I think we have a useful response.
And the recovery fund, is that supposed to be a permanent construction? You mentioned the European solidarity. Is that your goal?
Well, let's be clear, because I know also how sensitive it is. The agreement we reached last summer is an ad hoc solution. There's no ambiguity about this. It's this common debt, this recovery plan. It's one shot. It's a lot of money and it will last over a few years, but it's one shot, and the money cannot be extended or used for other purposes. That's clear. On a broader use of the instruments, we would not have had an agreement last summer. So we have to stick to this, I think. My personal view and my governance view is that That would be useful to have it at least as a tool of crisis response in the future. I don't hope and I don't expect another such a big crisis to happen again in the coming years, but we never know what can happen. 10 years ago, it was a debt crisis or a financial crisis. Now it's a health crisis triggering an economic one. We never know what will happen. I think it would be good to have it in our toolbox. But let's be clear. I said it before, no country would be dragged in a way against its will. It's so important, so sensitive that we need unanimity on all of these decisions. So I do hope we can have this debate again, but it's probably too early to have it. And this particular tool will not be used for other purposes. And that's also why, just to add one word, that's also why I think it's so important for the countries who advocated this plan, this recovery fund, to make it useful, economically relevant in their economies and in the EU, to create a kind of positive assessment of this recovery strategy and recovery plan. If it's not the case, it would be exactly the contrary. Countries, Denmark, but also others, which have said, I'm not convinced, I'm a bit reluctant at the beginning, will say, okay, see, as it was not well used, so never again. So I think we have to write this new chapter by making this plan work soon and quickly.
So we should look upon the implementation of this. I think it was Winston Churchill who once said, no matter how beautiful a strategy is, you should also look upon the implementation of it. Strategic autonomy is a term that you often use, and also your president often uses. You didn't mention it right now, but what does it actually mean, strategic autonomy? I'm pretty sure that if I ask some Danes, maybe not the Danes in the street, but some business people, they would be slightly afraid that this is actually a euphemism for protectionism. What would you say to those people?
Well, I agree actually that we are quite good in the European system to resort to words which are not very clear or something too technical. Personally, I sometimes, I must say, use or defend the concept of strategic autonomy because we now find it in some Brussels documents, and I'm happy about it in substance. But you're right, I think for people just trying to get involved in these European discussions, it's not very clear. I used, or my president uses the word sovereignty, which in French sounds quite well. Maybe it does not translate so easily. But if I have to risk a simple definition of what we put behind these words, it's being able to define and defend our European interests and European values. I would put it this way. What does it mean? It means that not only in security and defense, it's about trade, it's about climate, it's about, we have more, I think, common visions or opinions, interest also, between Copenhagen and Madrid than we have, I think, between Copenhagen and Washington. Of course, even more than between Copenhagen and Beijing or Moscow, obviously. Which means there is a common set of European values and interests. Just look, not to be too long, but at the crisis response. There is a European model, I think, in this crisis response, not just talking about what the EU as institutions did. When you look at what Denmark did, when France did, when Germany did, when Spain did, and so on, or is still doing actually, we supported a lot jobs, purchasing power, revenues of people, a lot of social solidarity, a lot. Keeping the democratic debate open. We see in all our societies, governments being questioned, and this is fair, and this is sound, and this is normal in our democratic models, even in these difficult times, that the democratic debate remains open. If you compare with Asia, even with the US to another extent, it's not the same. In the US, for instance, the level of social protection during the crisis was not the same as it is in Europe. There is recovery, there is investment in the economy, but not the same type of social protection for all. So I think this is an element of definition of the European model. And I'm not saying, I've never been advocating that it means that everything should be decided at the EU level. It does not mean that we should also forget about other types of cooperations. I think NATO, I think the transatlantic relation should remain. And there are elements of our security protection interest as well. But I do think that we need to do more as Europeans for our own security against cyber attacks, intervening in areas which are key for our long-term security, as we are trying to do in Africa and Sahel, for instance. You mentioned protectionism, so it resorts to trade. I think in trade it's also a good example. If we want to, I think we converge a lot. So-called total free traders country, which are sometimes caricatured in France and in other countries, including sometimes Denmark, have moved to something more balancing. We need to protect our interests towards China. We have to make sure that some investments are well taken care of and so on. And France, other countries under President Macron, have also realized and recognized that we need open markets, we need trade, we need not to close our country or economies, of course, to our big partners, even to our rivals like China or Russia or others. And that is, I think, a good example of an area, trade, in which we can find a balanced European model. We need probably trade deals, trade cooperation, but I think we all recognize also that, for instance, let's take China. It's good to have an investment agreement, but it should lead us towards rebalancing our relations, being able to do more anti-dumping, to open more their markets, to protect our public markets to a bigger extent because they are subsidizing de facto their companies to invest in our countries, and so on and so forth. So I think this autonomy or this sovereignty is about being more adamant in the definition of our interests, realizing that our first club of cooperation, political cooperation, economic cooperation is the EU. And just a final word on this, I think Brexit was a very good wake-up call, if I may put it like this, in this respect. It was very clear. Denmark and France, for instance, were very much on the same page all along this negotiation, on all the 27 actually, to say we like the UK very much. They are very important economic partners. They are a crucial strategic and political partner, but we belong to the EU and we defend our interests as EU in the trade agreement we have struck and so on. And I think we realized for the first time what we had in common in a difficult negotiation, even with a very close partner, ally and friend.
Excellent. And now we have 1 minute left, and I enjoy your sort of Europe in 1 minute on Twitter. I think you do it every Friday. So let's have an experiment here at the end, because I know that you will go to the virtual European Council advising your president. So let's hear what in 1 minute, why is this European Council important, and what are your expectations from it? Floor is yours.
Thank you. This European Council is very important first because we need to prove, beyond illustrating, to in substance coordinate better our COVID responses. So we will discuss health, we will discuss vaccination campaigns, vaccination deliveries. I think it's very useful to share information about our health situations and to see every action we can encourage to speed up, as I was mentioning, our vaccine deliveries. Probably we will need to open new boxes for the coming weeks or months, like this famous debate about vaccine certificates, which we are cautious about in France, but I think we need to work on it, because at some point it will become an issue, it will become a solution, probably also to free movement, to free activities in all our countries and within the EU. And it's a good example because I think we also need to go beyond COVID. And that's also why this council will be focusing on defense and security and relation with Africa, for instance, which I think we should not forget, even if we are all very focused on the COVID crisis at the moment.
Well done. I can see you practice that, sort of happy doing that every Friday. Thank you very much for your time. I mentioned at the beginning that you have a Lego collector's item with the Élysée Palace. I have also a collector's item at home, wind turbine. So I can promise you that when you come to Copenhagen, you speak at one of our events, I'll make sure that you actually get that wind turbine. Thank you very much, and have a nice European summit, an important European summit. And now it's 2 o'clock. It's time for a bio break out there, emails, or maybe a short walk with the dog. Please be back in 10 minutes past 2, so 10 minutter over 2, and then we go to Berlin. Au revoir. Merci.